Viridian, the Green Guide, written by Clouds, read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 14, Bullies. A kick to Izuku's shin woke him up. Had he fallen asleep in class again? He'd been getting a lot less sleep since he started going out as a vigilante, which, of course, led to him getting more tired during the day, but it only got worse now that he had a still healing concussion. His teachers didn't seem to care enough about Izuku to notice when he fell asleep in class, but his peers were apparently a different story. He looked up to see a few students crowded around his desk, but most of the class, including Kachan, had already left for lunch. "What's the matter, Deku?" That was the kid with extendable eyeballs that hung around Kachan sometimes. "Busy night whoring yourself out or something?" "No," a kid with a minor glow quirk said. "Deku's too useless even for that." Eyeballs laughed. "You're right. Just do everyone a favor, Deku, and die. Leave some oxygen for the people who actually deserve to breathe." Izuku stared at the floor and tried to ignore them as he gathered his books and stood to go to lunch. He was already halfway through the day. He could get through this. It was only another few hours. He made it all the way to the hall before his classmates started harassing him again. "Hey, Deku!" Eyeballs growled. "Are you ignoring us?" Izuku ran down the hall as fast as he could. If he could get to the lunchroom, then hopefully his classmates would get distracted by the promise of food. And even if they weren't, the beatings tended to be a little better if there were a lot of people around. Unfortunately, in his haste to get away, Izuku forgot to watch where he was going and ran straight into the kid in his class whose hair was made of boulders. "Watch it, Deku," Boulders said. "I'm sorry." Izuku stuttered. I wasn't looking where I was going, and I just wanted to go to lunch, so..." He tried to duck around him, but Boulders put a large hand on his shoulder and shoved him back before he could. "Do you think you can just run into me and not face any consequences?" Izuku started shaking and turned around. If he could run before the other two caught up, then he might be able to take a different route to the lunchroom. And "There you are, Deku!" Eyeballs leered at him as he and Glow cut off his path of escape. Izuku glanced behind him, only to see Boulder standing threateningly behind him. "Are you guys looking for this nerd?" Boulders asked. "Deku here thinks he can ignore us," Glow said. "Yeah." Eyeballs leaned into Izuku's personal space. "He thinks he's better than us." Izuku shrank. No, that's not it at all. I just really think we should be getting to lunch." "No." Boulders turned both fists into rocks and slammed Izuku up against the wall. "I think maybe we should teach this quirkless loser a lesson first." Inko rushed to the school in a panic, almost forgetting her purse at work in her hurry to get to Izuku. The woman on the phone hadn't said much, just that Izuku had gotten into a fight at school and that she needed to come pick him up. A fight? Her baby didn't get into fights. He watched them, he analyzed them, but he didn't get into them. What had happened? What if Izuku was hurt? What if he... Inko shook her head. No, she couldn't let her anxiety get the best of her right now. Izuku needed her. She needed to be calm for Izuku. When she finally reached the school, she hurried through the front doors and followed the signs to the front office. "Excuse me, I got a call from you about my son, Izuku?" "Mrs. Midoriya?" the secretary asked. Inko recognized her voice as the one who had called her, telling her to come in. Inko nodded, and the secretary gestured to a door off to one side of the office. "The principal is already waiting for you. Go right in." "Thank you." Inko rushed through the door, but stopped and put her hand over her mouth when she caught sight of Izuku. "Oh, baby!" Izuku was huddling in a chair across from the angry-looking principal. His uniform was torn and would definitely need to be replaced. But that wasn't what brought tears to Inko's eyes. No, what brought tears to her eyes was the mottled collection of new bruises covering her son's face and neck. From the way the bruises dipped below his collar, Inko had no doubt that his arms and torso were in a similar state. What had happened? Mrs. Midoriya, you're here. Good. The principal gestured for her to take the chair beside Izuku. Now that you've finally arrived, we can discuss Izuku's punishment. Punishment? Inko looked between the principal and Izuku, who seemed to be trying to make himself small enough to disappear, with no luck. You haven't even told me what this is about. As my secretary explained over the phone, Izuku instigated a fight. A fight? Inko looked at the principal incredulously. Look at the state of my son. That wasn't a fight. It was a beating. The principal's mouth tightened into a stern frown. He attacked a number of his classmates unprovoked and forced them to take a defensive action. As I'm sure you are aware, Mrs. Midoriya, our school has a zero-tolerance policy toward fighting, and as such, I am suspending Izuku for 2 weeks. Suspension? Inko shook her head. What about the other students? Are they being suspended too for what they did to my son? The principal glared at Izuku, then at her. We are not in the habit of punishing victims for defending themselves, Mrs. Midoriya. Your son was the one who started the fight, so he's the one who will receive punishment. What? Inko couldn't help raising her voice. But my son didn't start the fight. I know Izuku. He wouldn't do that. Those other children, if you have a problem with the way I run my school, Mrs. Midoriya, the principal interrupted, then perhaps you should find a different one. Inko stared at him in disbelief. What? That will be all, Mrs. Midoriya. The principal turned back to the papers on his desk. Izuku will not be allowed back in school for the next 2 weeks. If he shows up on campus, you will have to come pick him up, and if it happens again, we will have no choice but to pursue legal action. Have a nice day. For the first time, Inko realized that the principal hadn't once tried to ask her son for his side of the story or even allowed him to defend himself since she'd arrived. There was always the possibility that he'd given Izuku that chance before she'd gotten to the school, but with the way the conversation had gone, Inko didn't think that was very likely. She'd been called here so the principal could execute punishment, not to resolve the situation or figure out what really happened. Izuku didn't look up as they left and started walking toward the train station. What had been happening at that school? What had Izuku been going through? She knew that there had been a few problems with some kids being mean to him right after he was diagnosed quirkless, but he'd always told her so they could report the issue, and then he'd said they stopped. Unless it never actually stopped, did it? Inko watched as Izuku froze, then seemed to physically force himself to keep watching. Her poor baby. He'd been going through all this alone for years. Why didn't he tell her? They were all each other had. He should have told her. She could have what? Gone to the principal? A fat lot of good that would have done. What could she have even done if she had known? I'm not mad at you, Izuku, she said quietly. I'm sad that you felt you couldn't tell me, but I understand why you didn't. You can be honest with me, baby. The bullying didn't stop. did it. Izuku swallowed, then shook his head, and Inko felt her heart break. Her baby was never this quiet. What had those boys been doing to him to force Izuku, who could hardly think without mumbling, to go completely silent? She wanted to... Well, it probably wasn't very healthy to want to hurt children, but they had hurt Izuku. They deserved it. Thank you for telling me, baby, Inko said. I'm here. I don't know what we're going to do, because the school obviously isn't going to be any help. But we'll get through this together, okay? Izuku looked up at her and smiled shakily, then winced as they started going down the stairs to the station. Inko frowned and looked at her son a little more closely. Sure, that wince could have been from any one of his numerous bruises, but had he been cradling his left arm like that the whole time? How had she not noticed that? Well, she'd probably been distracted by the bruises and the jerk that called himself the principal, so she couldn't blame herself, but from the way he was holding it, his arm had to be in a lot of pain. Izuku, what's the matter with your arm? Izuku froze and looked up at her with scared, wide eyes before forcing a smile onto his face. It's nothing, Mom. Don't worry about it. Inko frowned. The first words her son had spoken to her since this whole mess began, and he was trying to convince her that everything was fine. He obviously wasn't fine. It's not nothing, Izuku. You look like you're in pain. Let me see it. Izuku shook his head and tried to rush ahead further into the station. Inko didn't know what possessed her to grab his injured arm to hold him back. Ow! Izuku screamed and snatched his arm away from her. The tears he'd been holding back falling freely down his cheeks. Inko held up her hands calmingly. Izuku, baby, you're hurt. Just let me look at it. He hesitated a long moment before extending the arm out to her and looking away in embarrassment. She gently rolled up the sleeve and gasped. The whole arm was turning an ugly shade of purple, and Inko really hoped she was imagining the strange way it seemed to bend now that Izuku wasn't holding it against his body. Izuku, we are going to the hospital. Izuku snatched his arm back again and rolled down the sleeve. Mom, I don't need... She shot him a look that shut him up. Izuku, from the looks of it, that arm might be broken. You need to go to the hospital. Izuku went silent again as they switched directions and got on the train that would take them to the hospital, rather than taking them home. Inko didn't like her son going silent like this, but it was preferable to him lying and insisting he was fine when he obviously wasn't. What were they going to do? End of chapter.